Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk It Out podcast. I'm Alec Lifshos, a.k.a. Trey Busy. I want to thank you guys for tuning in live tonight. It is October 10th, 2019. I surprised you guys a little bit on Tuesday, the 8th, because I didn't go live on that podcast. Instead, I pre-recorded it and I posted it to the platform network, or podcast network. So if you guys haven't heard that one, it's available wherever you listen to Let's Talk It Out. It's on Apple, it's on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, YouTube, wherever you listen to the podcast at. Tuesday's episode is available. Mark Wallin came on and he talked about his book, It Didn't Start With You, and that was incredible conversation I had with Mark. I mean, I really did thank him for coming on because he didn't have to come on like he did. So before I go too much further, I'm not alone tonight. I have a very, very special guest. She we were having a little technical difficulties before we got on live, but it's okay. We figured it out. So Sade Callwood is with me tonight. Can you tell people a little bit about yourself?
Yes. My name is Sade Callwood. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and right now I am completing my doctoral internship at Michigan State University. I'm getting my doctorate in clinical psychology, and I have an emphasis in African and Caribbean mental health. And I'm just really kind of energized about the amount of people of color that are actually coming into the field right now. I think we're doing some really good work, so I'm really excited.
Excellent. I'm really happy to have you on with me tonight. I mean, you could have just been like, no, I don't want to come on when I asked you.
I mean, it is a Thursday night, and I'm usually in bed by 9, so yeah, I'm up a little bit late.
So you're prioritizing having a conversation about mental health over getting some good sleep. You got to admire that, man. A lot of people would choose sleep over that. So before we dive right into it, I want to ask you, why are you passionate about mental health?
So I identify as Puerto Rican and West Indian, and to me, those are two very distinct identities. And people are like, oh, they're both in the Caribbean. I'm like, yeah, but it's not the same thing. And I grew up in a very Caribbean household where mental health was not spoken about. You're not feeling good? You need to eat something? You need to take a nap? That's always the response to I'm not feeling today. I'm not feeling good. There's no language for I'm depressed, really. So growing up and seeing that, it just really kind of stuck with me for a while. And I had my first psych class in high school. And I was like, wait, people like talk about their feelings? Like that's a real thing. And I think from then on, I decided like, okay, I'm going to be a psychologist. This is what I'm going to do. And I haven't looked back ever since. And what's really important to me is to be able to have that dialogue about what we're feeling. It's so easy to tell someone like, yo, I got a headache right now, or like, I got a cold, I got a stuffy nose, but like nobody is really asking you, how are you doing? People say, what's up, what's good, but like nobody's like, how is your mental? How are you feeling today? And I think for me, it's just really important to give marginalized and oppressed populations the language to be able to express really what's going on with them. And I think emotion is what connects people at the core of things. We see all these socio-political issues that we got going on in the country, and I think if we can all come to that common understanding of like emotion, I think we'd get much farther than we are right now, to be honest.
Yes, Trump is really, I mean, I've been on the record saying I don't agree with anything he's ever said about anything. Several times on several episodes, I've had conversations with guests, and we lean towards a little bit to the politics. Obviously, we don't all share the same views about him.
Right.
There's some people that obviously there's people that voted for him, some people that agree with him. But with me, obviously this is my podcast because I can say whatever the hell I want to say. Fuck Donald Trump and anybody who likes him. I can say that. It's my right as an American to be able to say that. A tax-paying American, actually. So now that we got that out of the way, back to the more important topic about how disenfranchised minorities, specifically in the black community, suffer from mental health conditions, and they aren't getting the proper treatment, and they aren't getting the proper acknowledgement for it in their own households, right? So it's Puerto Rican, and you said Puerto Rican, and what else did you say, Sade?
West Indian, Tortola, British Virgin Islands.
Man, I would not have remembered that. That's so
So
you say
Caribbean, all over.
okay, Caribbean all over. Okay, so
hmm
did your parents come to America? How did that
Uh,
work?
yeah, so my father immigrated from Tortola, which is British Virgin Islands. It's a smaller island right next to Puerto Rico or close by Puerto Rico. And my biological mother was born in Chicago, but I grew up with my stepmother who was born on a small island called Montserrat. Then she moved to St. Thomas, which a lot of people know because they vacation there. And then she moved to Miami when she was like 17. But my dad didn't move here till he was about 26. So he was an adult.
So it sounds like I have a lot of research I need to do on the Caribbean islands and the different
Yes,
names
you
of them.
do. Learn your geography.
Oh, you know what? And it's pretty because you're naming all these islands and stuff. I'm like, huh? Okay, I know Puerto Rico. I've heard St. Thomas before. Some of the other ones I'm a little iffy about. But your mom's from Chicago. I'm very familiar with Chicago. I'm very familiar with Chicago. That sounds like home. Oh wait, it is home. Um, so, do you still have a relationship with your mom?
That is a troubled and a strained relationship. Um, with my biological mom, not so much. But God bless women and men, people in general who take in children who are not their own. I really commend those people because it's not easy. So right now, I don't really have a close relationship with my biological mom, and I have all the love I need, so I'm okay.
Well, that's good. I mean, the only reason I ask is because it's rare. You know, it's not unheard of, but it's very rare when someone doesn't have like a relationship with their biological mom. It's typically, especially in the minority community, it's our fathers that aren't a part of our lives, right? You know,
hmm
like you hear about these kids growing up, especially the young men that are growing up without their father in their life, so they're seeking guidance from outside sources, outside male sources. You know, they turn to the streets pretty much, like gang violence or you know drug dealing and those type of things. They look up to those guys, the guys with the nice cars, the guys with the big chains and stuff like that. That's what they grow up idolizing, and in the urban community. So
For sure, for sure. I think there's a lot of different kinds of familial patterns in minority families, and I think some of them kind of get overlooked. But when we think about just lower SES, we think about lack of education, lack of access to resources in general. Particularly on my maternal side, it's more around like the addiction part. So just incarceration, that kind of thing. So I think in my story, the roles are reversed. So you would think, yes, usually it's the father in the family that's away because of either drugs or incarceration. But in this case, it's actually my mom.
so yeah, I mean, again, just I'm first of all, I'm happy that you were able to have a woman in your life like your stepmom. Like you said, God bless them, the people that do step up and step in to fill that role
hmm
because it's not easy. I can imagine it's not easy to raise someone that's not your own. But
Right.
I want to transition a little bit, outside of your personal life. Uh, the stigma inside the minority community that being open with psychologists or seeking help is a negative thing. Out of your opinion, what's a way that we could help break that stigma around being it's a negative thing for us to seek help?
Mhm. So I think really what it is, it takes, I think, two things. One, representation. I think like as of 2015, 86% of psychology in particular, not mental health in general, but psychologists, 86% of them are white. And that's what, so where, what is that? And that's not, the other percent is not just black. So it's just other minorities in general. So I think what it's going to take is more representation, which I am really energized about, because not only myself, but a lot of other young people of color are coming into this field. So I think that's going to help break some of those barriers. When people can go into an office or, go check out a website and see people who look like them, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do to kind of break some of these barriers. But in addition to that, I think it's about getting creative. There's a lot of evidence-based and empirically supported treatments that when you look at some of the research behind it, they're like, yeah, we had all of these, or we had a huge sample, but they're not actually sampling people of color or people that are representative of general population. So a lot of these treatments, or a good amount of these treatments, aren't really intended for people of color, or not really understanding the life experiences when you think about residual effects of slavery and intergenerational trauma and all those kinds of things. Some of the interventions have been adapted to be culturally responsive, but at the core of a lot of psychology interventions, it's from a Western perspective. And I think what we need is more creativity, which is like basically what you're doing. Starting these podcasts, I think, creates this ongoing dialogue. I know for myself, like when I first started listening to Breakfast Club and they had like different people coming on their show, I'm like, I didn't know other people talked about this. And then you hear people carrying that conversation on and creating this space where it's like, hey, we can actually talk about these things. I think that's what we need more of, getting on social media, getting on podcasts, doing docuseries. Like, people watch and people are wanting this information. People want to be able to talk about it, but they either, one, don't know how or don't know where to start. So I think people like you, other people who are doing things that are similar, that are just starting that conversation, like that is a place that we need to like cultivate more of. But I think those are the two main things: representation and being creative about how we're getting out, because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to walk into your office. It's just the reality. They're not.
So you both points you make, I agree with 100%. Representation does matter. If we feel like we have a voice or a presence in something, we are more likely to get involved with it, right? Also,
For sure.
You know, the platforms. I mean, I've started Let's Talk It Out September of 2018. And yeah, I mean, I've been pounding the table. I've been nonstop on social media speaking about it, just trying to get people involved, you know, going out of my way to have conversation with professionals, people in the psych field, having conversations with them, authors, actual therapists, social workers, people that, I mean, anybody you could think of. I've had conversation for a year straight. Actually over a year now. It's October. Over a year. And it's at the point now where it's grown to where, I mean, just a brief little summary about Let's Talk It Out if you're not familiar. It's grown to the point where I have people reaching out to me via email. I've been asked to come do presentations at places. I've been asked to have my work referenced in school districts. I mean, I've been asked to teach a anxiety class this upcoming May. I mean, it's grown to the point where it's getting out there more, and that was my vision for it, right? You know, my short-term vision was to let people know that it's okay. Because people that look at me, they and that's another thing that people do. You know, they put a face on anxiety, they put a face on depression, and there's no face for it. You know, there's no face for it. They look at me and they always like, oh, you dealt with anxiety? I'm like, what does somebody who deal with anxiety look like? You know,
Right.
Right. I mean, what does someone who's depressed look like? You know, they always assume that people that are happy aren't dealing with depression, but you know, depression is not just sadness, right? I mean, there's different varieties of depression.
So many different things. It looks so different for so many different people. And I think your point is exactly right, is that there's no particular face. It doesn't discriminate against race, gender, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, none of that. And again, I think it's also having that language. I mean, like I said, I grew up in a household where it's like, oh, you're not feeling well, like you should probably go eat something. Like, I feel like in my particular culture, we somatize a lot of those symptoms. So I have a stomach ache, I have a headache. I'm not really feeling like getting out of my bed right now. I don't want to talk to anybody. You have that isolation piece, and like that just low energy. It looks so different for so many different people. And I think sometimes we think of this like the textbook stuff, but it manifests in so many different ways. And I think culture sometimes plays a part in how we express some of those symptoms. So I think just being able to create some type of language outside of it is so important.
I mean, the one of the ones that's the scariest is when people are irritable, like they're more likely to be angry about certain things and snap off about certain things. It's real scary when it's that's the face of it for that person, right? Like again, like you said, I mean, the stigma around depression is like it's only sadness, but that's not true. So I want to steer around a little bit. I mean, you personally, I mean, you're in school.
Mm-hmm.
We know what needs to happen, right? But like, what are your plans once you get out of school? Like once you graduate and you achieve all these certifications and these diplomas.
I think right now I'm in that really funky stage where I haven't been out of school ever. So I'm trying to figure out, like, after this coming summer, like, that's it for me for education. And I've been kind of playing around with a few different ideas. I have been in university settings for the last 3 years. I was at Becker College in Worcester. I was at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. And like I said, I am at Michigan State University right now, completing my internship. And I'm really, really, really feeling the college population, working with young people that are about to be, the future of our world, and seeing all of the demands that they are under, and the stress that they're under. It's absolutely incredible, but I don't think I see myself working a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. I just don't see that as a useful way for me to employ my skills and change what's going on right now, if I can even do that. But I think I see myself kind of doing some clinical work, but I think really where I would like to be is more in the community. Since I've been out here in Michigan, I attended Big Sean's, I can't remember what he called it, but he had a weekend out here where he really focused on community and mental health, and he had a mental health panel, and like people from the community came out and were talking about things that I guarantee you they are not talking about day to day. And there is a huge need for it. So being able to connect with people in the community, do the groundwork, do the legwork, and maybe have a little bit of an online presence with some media psychology, whether it's on social media in particular or just a podcast. I am really into theater and acting. So just trying to find some ways to like combine all of my interests and skills. So I think a little bit of clinical work, but also really just being out there in the community and serving the needs of the people. So whatever it is that they're looking for, I'm trying to dial in. I think it's really important. Sometimes when we get to a certain level, we think we know what people need. And sometimes you need to take a step back. Like, yes, I have all this education and I have some expertise, but at the end of the day, to me, my clients really are the experts of their own lives. And I'm just here to supply them with whatever I have, but really they take charge of the situation. So I think that's really where I see myself.
So, B. Lifshow says, I'm glad the stigma is being broken in mental illness. Yes, it's more acceptable when you culturally accept behavior health, and people can be with people that look like it helps to build a trust in mental health. Great to know it's slowly becoming culturally diverse. Yeah, I mean, it's very slowly but surely, and I begin to notice it more on social media. I mean, people, minorities are beginning to talk about it a little bit more. They're about beginning to get a little bit open about it a little bit more. I actually this morning I posted something on Facebook that I shared on my Instagram. My exact words: and this is me quoting myself word for word. This morning, I posted, "Wake the fuck up and take control of your mental health and your peace of mind." That's exactly what I said, all caps. Right? People that know
Yes.
me know that how passionate I am about it. So I tell people I'm tired of this fucking pity party that you're seeing from people. They're out there, and we have these things that we hold in our hands. These smartphones. Holy shit! The amount of resources, the world that is open to you through this thing that's no bigger than 4 inches and maybe an inch and a half wide. The route of the world is open to you. You have resources to get help with anything. You don't have to sit around and just feel sorry for yourself and hope other people feel sorry for you. You need to take control of your life, right? You need to reach out to people. You need to contact others if you're unsure. Figure it out, man. Like, I mean, it's so crazy to me, man. Like the people research anything else. They research how to find shoes. They research cars. They research clothing lines and all this other stuff. But when it comes to their health of their brain, the most important organ inside their body, they just act like they don't know what to do.
Yeah,
Right?
I think, I'm hearing you, and I think I agree with you. And I would also add to it, when we think of communities of color and we think of the historical trauma that exists, we haven't really had much of a privilege to really sit back and feel for a really long time. And I don't even know if it's safe enough to do that yet, if that makes any sense. When we think about healing from some of those traumas, whether it is historical, whether it's past or just recent trauma, when it comes to communities of color, and I'm specifically talking about aggressive policing because that's what my dissertation is on, how can you heal if it's not safe enough to do so? And when we think about the level of oppression that still exists within major systems like education, housing, the judicial system, the healthcare system even, it's not entirely safe yet. So we're asking people to really dig deep into these really painful places, these traumas that are not only theirs, but their ancestors. And we're asking them to just deal with it. It seems like it's really easy, but it's not. And it's a scary, scary place to be when you don't know how to contain that. And that's why I think we see some of that, the irritability, the aggression, the anger, hypersexuality. Like, we see all these different ways of things being expressed because we haven't been given the resources or the tools or the skills to be able to actually deal with it. But I am so happy to know that at least in 2016, about 32% of the doctorates earned were from racial and ethnic minorities. So we're not, at that 50-50 mark yet, but it's coming, it's happening. And I'll be, graduating class of 2020. So we're coming, it's happening. It's taken some time, but I'm telling y'all, the people that I know, the people that are in my cohort, my peers, we are ready to change this dialogue and really be able to talk about what has been going on, what is going on with us. And not from a deficit standpoint, but being able to highlight our strengths and working from inside out. We want to see change happen, and I think we really, really need to start individually with ourselves.
So you said a lot of things I agree with. Change, people aren't going to change if they're comfortable, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to something being difficult, or you're to put it like this, I mean, if you're standing somewhere and I got a lighter next to your arm, are you gonna sit there or are you gonna move?
Oh, I'm gonna move.
You're gonna move, right? So it's uncomfortable. You have to. I like making people uncomfortable because that forces them to change something about themselves, right? Now, as far as family trauma goes, it's very deep. I mean, you've told me you listened to Tuesday's episode. If you haven't listened to Tuesday's episode, please listen to that episode. And please go get that book, because the secret, the code, the encryption to figuring out, why you are who you are, why do you deal with these feelings, why do you deal with these emotions. And I mean, the work is incredible that Mark's doing. And just even in his conversation, we don't understand how deep it is, right? I mean, it's genetically transferred to us through our grandparents, right? I mean, it's the I don't want to butcher his words. You guys need to check it out. But like you said, I mean, we haven't been given those tools because when we were growing up, our parents didn't know these same things, right? The internet wasn't really a thing. I mean, it was becoming a thing when we were younger, right? It's crazy to think of where we're at now compared to where we were 15, 20 years ago. You know, like the resources were not the same back then, but the resources today are truly, truly, truly incredible. Man, I'm just thinking about it. You know, I just had a flashback to when we had the dial-up internet, and Muggs still had to call people's houses on their house phone. You know, hope they dad didn't pick up. Call after 8. You know, he ain't gonna be by the phone. Things have changed so much that there are ways to find resources. People, I mean, everybody who listens to the podcast or follows me know how adamant I am about giving people resources if they need help, you know, if they need direction and stuff like that. I do whatever it takes to give people what I think will help them out. Resources, tools, therapists. I mean, I do everything I can to help others out. I don't just come sit down and have a conversation on the podcast. The podcast is pretty much looked at as like just a way for us to have a conversation, you know, just get different perspective about different topics. You know, different guests come talk about different topics. So this has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. I'm gonna change the whole conversation right now. I'm gonna change the whole conversation. I like doing that sometimes. This is October, right? October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but it's also Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? I mean, prevention. So domestic violence, right? I mean, I've read a stat that said 50% of it goes unreported. More than half of it goes unreported. That's ridiculous to think about how many cases there are just to know that there's so many unreported. I've gave people resources. I mean, we talked about it last week. Last month was a suicide prevention, so every episode I try to incorporate that in there. This is domestic violence prevention month, so I try to incorporate there as much as possible. So the hotline for, again, if you need someone to talk to, you need resources, is 1-800-799-7233. Again, that's 1-800-799-7233. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So coming back to you. And you know what? I'm not going to do that. That's too personal. I'm not going to ask you that much of a personal question. I'm just going to speak about it myself.
Okay.
So a lot of times when people are living in these types of relationships, they could develop conditions from them, right? You can develop anxiety from you know, not knowing if your partner's going to snap off or not because they're upset about something. You know, you don't know if you're going to develop PTSD, like be in a whole new relationship, but still get those same feelings that you felt of fear from this partner, right? And this partner probably couldn't have never even done anything to you. Like it's the awareness and the prevention, the signs. I mean, I just want to make sure that people have all the tools, all the knowledge that they need to know. Because again, one of the most powerful things that abusers do is they try to diminish your self-worth, right? They try to make you feel like you're not worth anything and that, you know, you need them, right, to make it. You're not enough on your own. And it makes me sick that there are people out there like that, right?
I think the other thing too, sometimes when we think about how people get caught up in some of those relationships and we have those questions of like, why are you still here? Why are you still staying? I think that sometimes what gets overlooked is like attachment, like that early attachment. What was your attachment like with your early figures, you know, parents or caregivers? And sometimes that will tell you a lot about what people are going to accept and what they think love is. Sometimes when we see people starting to like freak out when, you know, their partner's like, no, I'm out. I'm not here. I'm not with this no more. I'm not trying to do this. And you see that like volatile reaction. Like if you take a real good look at that person's early life and what their attachment was like, you're probably going to see something along the lines of like they didn't have consistent emotional caregivers. So I think that, it's much more, and I think it's on both sides for the perpetrator and for the survivor. There's a lot that's going on there with attachment in particular, and I think people sometimes just don't get, like, kids are sponges. Like, we take in everything from our environment. So from early on, we are seeing the examples and the models of, like, how are we to express love? How are we to express anger? What does it look like to be in a healthy relationship? And if we don't really have those, and we don't have other people around us in our environment to show us what that's supposed to look like, that's what I'm saying. This whole idea of, like, having emotions and learning how to deal with them. Like, yeah, it's okay to bring painful things up, but if you don't know how to contain those emotions, it gets really, really scary really, really fast.
Wow. Are you sure you're only 26?
I'm positive.
Because you sound like you've been here before. It's just like I'm just sitting here listening, like, man, that's pretty profound for someone of your age.
You see a lot of things, and I think everybody is drawn to mental health work for different reasons. I think a lot of people are drawn to mental health work from their own personal experiences, familial experiences. And I think that at the core of it, like, we really just want to understand not only other people, but ourselves. And it's not really, I didn't get into the field of psychology to work on me per se. But I think that part of being an effective and a efficient clinician is understanding yourself. Like, how am I going to ask people to come in 45 minutes every week or every other week and really get to know themselves and, like, why they react the way they do, why they see the world the way they do. And I'm not doing that myself. I feel like that's super, super hypocritical. And I think that, every single day when I'm either sitting with clients or I'm sitting in on a seminar or I'm reading something, I'm thinking, like, okay, well, how does this apply to me? Like, how do I make sense of it? Because, when I think about the work that I do, I'm working from a professional angle, but at the same time, I'm still a human. There's still another human in the room, and understanding the dynamics of energy and personality between a clinician and their client. It's really selfish to think that as a clinician, I don't need to do my own work and look inwards. So I'm not an expert on everything, and I'm still a developing expert. I'm not quite out there yet, but if you're passionate about something, you're gonna try to brush up on it. And I think, anybody who's really passionate about what they do, I would expect them to do the same thing.
Absolutely. So I'm going through, looking at some of the messages in the chat room. B. Live Show said, one of the single reasons I myself have heard people reject help is because they don't trust the person providing and would prefer and trust those who identify with them. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what we said earlier about, thank goodness that there's a lot more minorities going through these programs and getting these certifications and getting these degrees and going into this field, because, again, a lot of times people find it to be a little bit more easier to have a conversation with somebody that's similar to them, someone that they feel more comfortable talking to them because they feel like they can relate more. Right.
Right.
You go sit down.
Yeah, go ahead.
No.
It was interesting. I just moved out here to Michigan, and I aged off my parents' insurance because I'm 26 now. And so I was like, okay, I got my own insurance now. I moved to a different city. Like, I have a little bit more time on my hands. I think it's time for me to get back into therapy. And so my mom had called me earlier in the week, and I was like, I'm just, sitting here looking through therapists and, like, trying to find a therapist in the area. She was like, wait, what's wrong with you? And I was like, whoa, what? And she's like, are you okay? Is everything fine? Are you depressed? And I was like, I'm fine, actually. But I just think it's important for me to have a therapist, and I want to get back into therapy. And I think that's the other thing is, like, when we think of therapy and we think of mental health, we think that there must be something wrong. And it's really interesting because, my mom and my parents, they're so supportive of me, going for this degree and going for higher education. But there's still that historical stigma towards mental health and healthcare in general of like, I think it's great what you're doing, but like, I don't think you actually need the services you're giving to other people. And she just automatically assumed something was wrong with me. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm fine. But just like how I have a primary care provider, I want to have a therapist. Like, I need to check in on my mental health just as much as I check in on my physical health, because they're one and the same. They go together. They're not separate, or not as separate as, people make it seem. But I thought it was really interesting that she took it there, but I'm just like, no, I'm good. But this is something that I choose to do for myself. So I think just being able, and my thing in particular, when I was searching, I was like, I have specific things that I'm looking for in a clinician. And I think that's the other thing. Sometimes we are recommending people to, okay, yeah, go get therapy. Like, it's good for you. That's what you should do. But I think we're not having a conversation about, like, what are you looking for in a therapist? So when we think about why, clients don't stay in therapy, they don't return, they're like, I don't feel comfortable. I think they're just going in without having a set of standards. Like, what is it that you want? So what makes you feel comfortable? And I know it's really hard maybe to find people that might look like you. But I do think that there are, cross-culturally, I think that there are some clinicians out there who are really, really, really dedicated to providing culturally responsive work. So yes, they might not look like you, but, you read up on their profiles. If you want somebody who's going to make you feel comfortable, what does comfortable look like? And I think having that kind of written down when you're making these phone calls and trying to find a provider, I think that will help people kind of stick around with the clinician a little bit longer than going into it blind. So I think it's really important for people to know if they are going to take their time to sit down and really dig deep into some of the things that have been going on in their life, what does safety and comfort look like to you? So you have that choice to say, this is what I'm looking for. Do y'all have that here or not? If they don't, okay, move on. Next agency. Do y'all have this or not? And you will find something or someone that will fit your needs. But you just have to know what you're looking for.
Yeah, you're just dropping just so much knowledge and wisdom in the chat room, and basically to the network in general. I mean, again, that's a lot of people wouldn't think to write down what you're looking for in a therapist. They just have a thought in their head, but having a thought in your head and actually writing something down is two totally different things, right? I mean,
for sure.
You have this physical, okay, this is what I need, and again, I mean, calling around, and it's certain things like that people wouldn't think to do, right? I mean, they just go see a couple therapists. They go sit down with some guy that just got one of those plain. I don't know if you guys remember those old eye drop commercials. That guy's voice, the Clear Eyes commercials, got one of those types of voices. I could not stand having a dude talk to me like that for an hour. I would literally fall asleep within 3 minutes. Right? I mean, I'm just saying, that's me personally. Everybody else is not like that, but that's me personally. I couldn't have the guy from the Clear Eyes commercial with the monotone voice just talking to me. He has no up or down expression at all. It's just the same tone level, no matter how he feels, just talking to me the whole time. I couldn't do that. That's me personally, though. Just saying.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to kind of filter through, and I'm very new to the Michigan area, so I'm not entirely familiar with the resources out here, but one just general site that people can use is Psychology Today, and you can at least see a picture. You can see what they look like. You can see what their interests are, what ages that they work with, what are their specialties, do they speak different languages, do they provide Christian-based therapy? There's so many different things that are available out there to people, and it's okay, well, you'd go online and you're sitting through Amazon, you'd scroll through 15 pages worth of reviews for this one product. Why can't you do the same thing for a therapist? It's just sometimes I think that people are not I don't know if they're just not ready. I don't know what it is exactly, but I think just normalizing, like, okay, yeah, just like how you shop for something on Amazon and you're looking at the reviews and seeing like, okay, does this fit with me? It's the same thing you could do with a therapist. It's the same exact thing.
So thank you for going back to what I said, to making it seem like I wasn't crazy for saying people have these powerful devices in their hands and they can literally do anything they want with these if they use them correctly. And yeah, basically it's the same concept. I mean, they look for 15 to 20 minutes before they buy a shirt, but when it comes to finding the proper therapist, it's like, oh, I don't know what to do now.
Listen, so, I know myself. I will be on Twitter and I will literally read through like if I open up a thread, I will literally sit there and read like 50 comments, easy. Like, what are other people saying about this particular tweet? And I'm like, and it's really that hard for people to like look into something that's like actually going to benefit them. I think sometimes just kind of changing that perspective and changing that lens and having that dialogue about like, well, one, this is where you can find it. So the fact that you're providing people with resources, I think that's so amazing. Because I think a lot of people just don't know where to look. Like maybe people are interested and people are talking, but they wouldn't know the first thing about, how do I even find a therapist? What website do I look at? Starting with your insurance is a really good place to see like what's covered. If you're part of a university or institution, they likely have a counseling center. You can talk to your employer about resources that they're connected to because most employers have like specific companies that they might work a little bit closer with. Starting with the church, I know that that's another big thing. Sometimes people are like, oh, I can't have God and a therapist at the same time, but it's totally doable. You can definitely do that. And I think a lot of church people are now becoming more connected with mental health clinicians because they're seeing the way in which spirituality and religion can go hand in hand with mental health work. So there are ways to get connected. There are ways to find people out there. But I think we just need to continue to talk about it and informing people about where you can find these resources.
I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy college life to come sit down and have a conversation with me about mental health on a Thursday. I know how much how much people in college, they're inclined to celebrate what we used to call back in my day Thirsty Thursday. For you to spend your Thirsty Thursday.
I haven't been in undergrad for a little while. I'm in grad school now. I'm in a doctorate program, so can we put some respect on my name, please?
Listen, okay, you're still in college though, so it's like
I'm in grad school. It's very different. It's not the same. It is not the same.
Okay, all right. So, like I was saying, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to ask you before we got out of here, is any last, words of wisdom or bits you want to give the podcast community?
Please, I implore you. I am begging you to keep the conversation going. We send these like really shallow texts every now and again, like what's good. Ask your people, your loved ones, how is your mental? That is a question that I've gotten into the habit of asking. If I haven't talked to people in a little while, or even if I talk to them every day, how is your mental? And that's a very different question, and people answer it very differently than what's good, how are you? And just keep this conversation going. And I think we can really get much further if we can just normalize the conversation around mental health. And I thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in live tonight. If you're listening back to the podcast, I really do appreciate you guys tuning in live. If you're subscribed to it, I really do appreciate however you listen to it, whatever platform. Again, I hope everybody has a good weekend, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week.